Hello everyone and welcome to this evening's taster session with Professor David Clatterbock. I'm Heather Powers and I've been with Adventures with Agile from its start back in 2014 in various capacities, supporting the team, the core team, the trainers and the coaches. And so for those who are unfamiliar with Adventures with Agile, if this is your first meetup with us, we are a global Agile training provider. And our ethos is all about making working life better. So thanks to everyone for joining us. If this is your first time attending our online meetups, myself and the AWA team would like to extend a very big welcome to you. We host meetups and webinars every month, so check out our website and our meetup page for further information about those. A reminder that our sessions are recorded. And you can find the videos of our previous meetups on our website and social media channels, including one with Professor Clatterbuck from April. So if you missed that one, you can find the recording on our website. So David, who's leading tonight's taster session, will be running a team coaching course with Adventures with Agile starting on the 20th of July. So in this course, you'll have the opportunity to learn directly with David. More information about it there. The course is spread over 8 3-hour sessions and aims to provide attendees with the knowledge and skills to work directly with teams and explore every stage of a team coaching assignment. And you can find more details on the AWA website, adventureswithagile.com. For any Enterprise Agile coaches here, there are some spaces left on our Enterprise Agile Coach Bootcamp, which is starting the 7th of June, which combines 2 IC Agile certifications, the ICP CAT and the ICP ENT. So again, do check our website for full course information if you're interested. And now I'll hand over to Professor David Clatterbock. We at AWA are absolutely honoured and privileged to have him with us again tonight. He really is one of the original pioneers in the field of modern coaching and mentoring, and his commitment to the work is truly inspiring. He continues to share generously his knowledge and his expertise. So David, welcome and over to you.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, Heather. So I'm going to share some slides, I hope, if we can make it work. Let's see if that works. I think that's, oh, there we go, that one. Share. How's that? Good. There we go. That should work. Fantastic. Can you hear me? Perfect. All right. Yes. So welcome everybody. If I'm looking up here, it's because I've got my screen with everybody up here, and I've got the slides here. So life is complicated. Let's just, what I'm going to be mainly talking about, except I've completely pressed the wrong thing, is team coaching from a complex adaptive systems perspective. And what I can't do is actually move my slides. There we are. That's a better way of doing it. So what I'm going to do is just talk about team coaching generally. And then as we go, I'll sort of make links to Agile as appropriate. But one of the things that we've certainly noticed is that while the Agile movement has been great in certain areas, it isn't team coaching as such. It's in most cases, and so there is the bringing together of Agile and team coaching is one of the most important things I think we can do right now, simply because teams are the core, the lifeblood of organizational survival. We did a survey last year when we asked organizations, HR, senior line managers and coaches, what they thought, where they thought the emphasis should shift, if it should shift, between development and reward and recognition for people for their individual performance, and development and reward for people in teams. And overwhelmingly, everybody said we have to move more and more towards team collective development and collective recognition. So we're seeing a major movement across large organizations and small organizations in this whole area. So what we've seeing is that one of the reasons driving this is because you can have a team full of really brilliant, high-performing people, and the team doesn't perform very well because they're all doing their own thing. We see this in the same context within organizations. You can have lots of high-performing teams, but the organization doesn't perform very well. So that's from an organizational perspective. From a coaching perspective, increasingly we're finding that you cannot really manage coaching at the level that we're now expecting coaches to operate if you don't think systemically. And if you're going to think systemically, you've got to be able to think about this, not just the immediate systems around a client, but the team as part of the key systems that enables them to either, or helps them or hinders them in their own performance. So this moved away from simplistic linear thinking coaching, I think is absolutely essential. And one of the reasons it's essential is because creeping up in the dark are all these artificial intelligence algorithms. Yeah, the robots are coming. And if you're a growth model linear thinking coach, most of what you do can already be done by an AI. It's just it's at the moment too expensive to bring them in. That's going to change. It's already changing. But what we do when we think systemically, the kind of thing, and when we bring ourselves into coaching, that's where we maintain our lead, if you like, over the artificial intelligence. And no matter what we do, the complexities of the problems that we face in organizations and more widely, they require more and more teamwork. And of course, this word teaming, which is a fairly new concept, but essentially it's the nature of being able to form a team and operate through teamwork immediately without having to go through all this stuff around forming, storming, norming to performing, which isn't very well evidenced anyway. We can come back to that if you wish later. So if you're focusing on individuals, it's part of the problem. It's not part of the solution. Most of us know we go into an organization, they talk about the top team. They're anything but a team. They're a bunch of people who are fighting each other and protecting their own territory. And they really are, and they only come together when it suits them. I'm exaggerating, but basically very few of the top teams that we see are really teams. They're just groups that happen to have to report to the same CEO. Leadership too. The way that we think about leadership is changing. We're seeing increasingly the move towards distributed leadership. People are more intelligent. People have more to offer. The idea of the leader sitting at the center and telling everybody what to do, that was dead 20 years ago. It's just taking a long time to actually die. And so what we've got to do in organizations, if we're going to survive against constant change, we've got to be changing at least as fast. And so that means we change at individual level, at team level, function level, organizational level. We need teams and team coaching to support those processes because they're not going to work otherwise. And so if we're looking at team coaching, it's got these three aims. Firstly, to future-proof the team, to enable the team to be able to survive into the future. And in order to do that, it's got to understand how it works internally, what's going on externally, the systems within and around it. And with that clarity, it can make better decisions. And that clarity also is part of enabling the team to coach itself. The whole point of being a team coach is to help people or to help the team to learn the skills of self-coaching so we become obsolete. That takes skill. Team coaching isn't team building. That's about helping people get on well together. And although there may be some crossovers, it's a very different process. Just because people get on together doesn't mean to say they'll be performing well. Team facilitation is about solving a specific issue that the team brings. It's not about building capacity and capability for the longer term. It's not about helping the team to coach itself. Strategy away days, very helpful, but they're not team coaching. And it certainly isn't just coaching the individuals in a team on their own, although you might do that as well in team coaching. So team coaching is something special. It's much more than that. And it basically is a way of supporting the team in growing as fast as it needs in the environment to match the requirements of its environment. Now, the MCC's got developed its first team coaching standards, and there's 4 levels here. There's foundation, which enables somebody to work with a team leader. There's practitioner, which enables you to start coaching the whole team. There's senior practitioner, which enables you to be the lead coach in a team coaching pair. And there's master practitioner, which is sort of, which is nobody's really fully defined, although the standards are there, which really is something that we all aspire to in the sense of contributing to the development of the profession. And ICF has got some team coaching competencies, which is basically a few bells and whistles added to its one-to-one competencies. But it's a start. It's on a journey also to support team coaches. If we're going to be a team coach, that we start almost invariably by learning not to coach the team, but to coach the team leader. We work with, most of the team coaching assignments come through team leaders in many cases, I think. So the team leader needs to be able to work, to coach their team, to have the conversations that the team needs in order to grow and to create a different kind of culture. So as a team coach, we can work with that team leader, thinking about them and having those conversations. And then they go away and they have those conversations. They come back to us for further guidance and support around how they do that. There's a number of definitions of team coaching, but this is my favorite. So it's a learning intervention designed to increase collective capability and performance of a group or team through the application of coaching principles of assisted reflection, analysis, and motivation for change. I hate definitions because they're all so boring. But anyway, this one is no exception, but it does capture all the critical things. It's about capability and performance. It's about using coaching processes or approaches to help that team really understand itself and make better decisions and learn to work together in much more effective ways. So we're not doing it for them. We're not coming in as a consultant and telling them how to do it. We're supporting them in the conversations that they have in order to make this happen within their team. It's different in lots of ways. And obviously, when you're talking one-to-one with somebody, what's said is confidential. When you're working with a team, people are going to have things that they would say to you one-to-one, they wouldn't say to you in front of the team. So you end up with knowledge about people that you have from individual conversations that you can't reveal in the team. It requires a lot of Chinese walls and attentiveness. The way that we think and decide, people advance in their thinking, they get things at different paces. We've got to be able to cope with team coaches, with some people who have really sort of got it and want to move ahead, and some people who haven't, in the same room. And if we go with either of them, we're going to be upsetting the other. So how do we manage the pace of learning and deciding? The scope of the topic. Most teams spend most of their time talking about things that everybody knows or don't really belong in the collective discussion. We can help them to change that. The degree of trust in the team and the degree of conflict in the team. The nature of the trust that you have with each of those members and they have with you and that you have with your team coach or that you have with the team leader, it gets complicated. You've got conflict going on inside yourself, maybe about what to do next. You may have conflict with your team coach. You may have conflict with the team leader, and the team leader may have conflict with the team, and the team members may have conflict with each other. When you start to look at it, there are in a typical team, well, if you've got a team of 8 people, you've got 56 different combinations of a potential conflict or levels of trust. It's complicated. And that's what makes it such enormous fun, but also requires a lot more attentiveness. So when we think about performance, what do we mean by performance? Nobody really defines it properly. So you get, oh, well, you hit your targets, but at what cost? If you, one of my favorite examples is an organization where it was hitting its targets, but at the cost of safety and the health of its key people. And in the top 20, 3 of them had heart attacks over the course of an 18-month period. Is that really what we mean by performance? Performance is not something that is simple to identify. In fact, we often spend a lot of time helping a team define what performance means in its particular context and from the perspective of its different stakeholders. So we can differentiate between performance, which is about what we do now and how the team works now, its and capability, how it's going to perform in the future, and its capacity, how does it do more with less? And I think that's a fairly straightforward way of doing things. I'm going to admit the person there. There we go. When I was paid by one of the world's biggest technology companies to go and interview their highest performing teams. And it was fascinating. And these are things that we found, and the team, my own team, and we interviewed teams all over the world. They spent a lot of time making sure that the team had the right people in it. They used failure, success. Really, when people failed, they said, "Well, look, we're experimenting. We expect to fail. If you're not failing, sometimes you're not working. You're not actually doing anything different." So they had a really positive view of success and failure. They enabled people to do the things they had the energy for. Trust and respect. Well, of course, they had that. You wouldn't. All the research shows that that's essential. They saw change not as something to be feared, but something to embrace. They had clear goals. They had fizz and buzz. Fizz is the enjoyment from the work you do, and buzz is the enjoyment for the people around it. And they had a secure leader, the leader who didn't see their role as managing anybody. They saw their role as enabling people to manage themselves. And I think that's a big distinction. So this is just one company. And what we don't know is whether these traits are essential factors in order to create a high-performing team, or whether they're actually symptoms of being a high-performing team. Now, we're pretty sure it's the former, but we don't have enough evidence to be able to say definitively and without some question mark. It's also important, I think, to remember that we need to think linearly. We've got loads of systems around or approaches which are linear in organizations. I did a study some years ago where the research question was, if what HR does, all these HR processes for talent management and succession planning, if they work, how come the wrong people so often get to the top? And the answer was, well, they don't work because they're all linear thinking rather than systemic thinking. They forget that people in their organizations are constantly evolving, sometimes in unison, sometimes not. So all the things down on the left there, the things that relate to linear thinking. The things on the right, those all relate to systemic thinking. So how do we actually begin to live with uncertainty, look for emergent and evolving outcomes rather than nice, predictable and static outcomes? These are all part of the changing system in thinking that have to happen within all teams now, but which we as team coaches have to exemplify and to help them achieve. And so looking at the models that we see out there, and I'm not going to go into enormous depth on these, but one of the big pieces of flim-flam, I would say, is the Patrick Lencioni 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's one lovely quote. It's pop science, and it is. It has it purports to show a structure that's clearly, when you start to look at it with a critical eye, not true, and it misses out a lot of the key factors that actually that undermine performance or are real issues relating to performance, such as external factors. It's not always internal dynamics that make a team dysfunctional. External factors have a big impact too. So we have to be very careful of deficit models like that. And what we did was an enormous study of loads and loads, hundreds of articles looking at team performance. These are some of the things, we found over 142 things, I think, factors. And we boiled them down to these. Most of which are fairly obvious, I think. Requisite diversity, having enough diversity in the team and using that diversity effectively for in a positive way. And what we then did was to boil it down even further. And what we found was that you can basically see everything that impacts a team comes under one of these pillars or the substrate, the leadership. So purpose and motivation. What are we here for? Who cares what we're here for? Does it energize us? Do we feel enthusiastic about it? The external process and systems. What do our stakeholders think? How do our stakeholders work with us and regard us? The relationships. How much psychological safety is there in this organization or team? The internal processes. How do we make decisions? How do we communicate? What are the quality processes? And the learning. Are we learning as fast and now as fast as our stakeholders and our environment need us to? And then leadership. That's a fascinating one. There's a big difference between leadership and being the titular leader. So I did I spent ages trying to find a valid and credible study of what do leaders actually do. So what are the functions of leadership? And I can find studies from the 60s, which are very much about command and control, which didn't seem very relevant. But in the modern environment, what are the functions of leadership? I found one well-constructed macro study that had 15 functions of a leader. And what we found was only 2 of those, as we took these round and we shared them with teams and with coaches around the world, only 2 of those functions actually were solely reserved to the leader. Everything else could be to some extent distributed amongst the team. You know, strategizing, discipline, a whole variety of things, how you distribute bonuses. All of these things can actually be done but with the team rather than to the team. And the only 2 that were reserved for the leader was getting sign off from resources from above and protecting the team from interference from outside. Everything else could be done in part or whole by the team members themselves, which gives us a whole new sense of what leaders are there for. So leaders can be curators of the team processes and these things and what's happening in these other 5 pillars here. So that was our conclusions, and we've been working with this with loads of companies around the world. And if you put them together, basically, in any situation, we would ask a team, okay, tell us some times when things have really worked well for you. And now look at and look with the red is when they're not working very well, and when the green it's things that are things that are getting in the way, and green is things that are supporting it. Let's compare your purpose and motivation with how you're getting on with your stakeholders and the way you relate to your stakeholders. What's happening there? And you may be on the green side, or you may be on the red side. What's happening there? And mostly we get a mixture. But what happens, of course, if it's all on the green side, you get all of these things here. I'm going to give you a moment just to read these, but these are just examples. You know, if you've got good relationships internally, and you've got good and you spend time and trying to understand your stakeholders, you're also going to have good relationships with them. If you've got bad relationships internally, the probability is your stakeholders are going to see all the divisions within the team. And then when it's on the red side, when one or more of these is not working properly, when you've got very poor internal processes, you're going to have duplication and waste of effort. That's going to be multiplied very many times over if you actually lack a clear sense of purpose in the team. So all of these things combine to either help the team deliver what it's supposed to or not. And putting it all together, you can see that you get a matrix of different things. As I say, these are just examples. But what we've got here is the first complex adaptive systems approach to understanding the dynamics of a team. So some of the things here, purpose and motivation. Do we have the same narrative about the future? Where do we get our energy from? Then looking at our goal alignment, what we really want is this square in the middle where we get high collective performance. But you know, if we've got low alignment on how we're going to achieve the goals, or low alignment on what those goals are, then we've got a problem. If we've got low alignment on both, we've got disaster. So this we see frequently. A recent study by Sloan in the Sloan Management Review found that the majority of the top teams that it interviewed basically could not agree on what the strategic priorities for that business were. So if they can't agree, how's anybody else got a chance of understanding and getting alignment? The external processes, how do we understand and respond to our stakeholders? And stakeholders are people that you affect, influencers are people who provide the resources to you. And how do social processes influence the way we perceive and behave towards our stakeholders? So what happens inside the team? What's the language we use when we're talking about our different stakeholders? Then we can see inside the team the internal dynamics, the external dynamics, and the dynamics that go on between in this interface between. So understanding what's happening, the systems from internally, externally, and across those boundaries. And if we get really more complicated, when we go fully to complex adaptive systems perspective, what's happening between stakeholders, and where is the role of the team in affecting the functioning of the system as a whole? What could it do differently to make the system more effective? These are all the areas that team coaches begin to get into as they become more competent. And relationships, let's build trust. How much collaboration do colleagues actually need? I've just been asked to work with the EMEA region sales team trainers of a large corporation. And of course, the first thing is that because everybody's got their territory, most of the people in sales teams don't have a need to collaborate on task delivery. But what they do need is to collaborate at colleague support, in co-learning, in market intelligence, and all sorts of things. So collaboration in one team will be very different from collaboration in another. And I love this question, this issue of being responsible or taking responsibility and accountability for each other's well-being, development, and performance. If everybody can accept those three things, this is a substrate for making, or a foundation for really great teamwork. And if we've got diversity, how do we make sure it works for us rather than against us? And so the internal processes, what's our team narrative? Is it helpful or a hindrance? Are we really open to change, or are we resistant to it? What about decision-making traps? Sunk cost trap is it's when you go into the gambling, the casino, and you're playing on the one-armed bandit, and you've run out of coins. But you can see that it's going to pay out soon, so you go back and get some more, and you put some more, and you still go back again. That sunk cost trap. That's something that teams and organizations get hauled into very easily. And then what about the learning? Different types of team have different issues in learning. What actually enables us to learn, and what gets in the way of our learning? How can we measure and manage the quantity and the quality of our learning? And how can we learn fast enough when everything is changing so fast around us? It's very difficult to keep up. And the leadership, how do we get the kind of leaders that the team needs? What do we do if we've got a weak leader? And what about distributed leadership? Suppose there is no obvious leadership. This is something obviously that is an issue within many agile environments. So how do we actually manage that situation? How do we make leadership, as opposed to being the leader, really functional and driving change and positive developments? So here's the secure leader. They don't feel the need to control. They don't want to manage everybody. They may help them manage themselves. They don't want to know everything. They protect you from distractions. They spend a lot of time making sure that people understand the broad goals. They ask feedback from the team members, and they've got this growth mindset. They see themselves constantly growing, and the team constantly growing together. They really care not just about the team's goals, but also about the people. And I love this, the fact that they're aware that they too are a work in progress, and they're fully comfortable with that perception. Nobody's perfect, and we're not, and nobody's going to be. And so when we use Peril, the diagnostic, we use it in discovery interviews. How do we understand this team? We use it as a diagnostic, which should be used at multiple times in the team coaching process. We use it just a framework. Tell us about. Let's look at some examples, and you as a team decide what are the issues, how you're going to make sense of this and the complexities of your environment. And so when we're doing a team coaching assignment, there's a discovery. We observe the team. We interview everybody. We contract with them to how we're going to do this. A lot of learning together, and then we withdraw and we evaluate. And the withdrawal, I think, is fascinating, because what happens is that gradually the team realizes that they need less and less of you. And this is, I call it the Nanny McPhee moment. So in the Nanny McPhee moment, remember Nanny McPhee, when you need me but don't want me, I'll be here. And when you want me but don't need me, I have to leave. And I think that's one of the most satisfying parts of being a team coach. And so to learn to become a team coach, oops, that's this. I've left in a slide relating to Canada, but basically the program that Heather and Simon have already talked about, we're going to be doing a program with you, we hope. And there's also a global team coaching institute, which is very much it's an online program which by WBEX, which is the other program that's out there. Obviously there are other team coaching programs around. This is the book. That's the advert. There we go. That's it. So over to everybody for your comments, questions, thoughts.
So David, there was a question that came up in the chat, and someone was asking around the balance between when managers or the leader who is probably paying for this coaching wants to understand what's going on in their teams that is coaching, and how does that how does that sort of confidentiality within the team balance out between what the team says in the coaching session versus what the managers want to know about what's going on with their team for the coaching they're paying for?
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay, so the answer is that is the manager part of the team or not? And if the manager is part of the team, he's part of the team coaching. So actually, I'm going to stop sharing so we can I can see everybody properly.
That's good.
There we go. There, good. So yes, if we're team coaching, if we're coaching the manager individually, it's basic. One of the first things we're doing is helping them understand how are you going to get your team to be honest with you, which means that you've got to be honest with your team. So it's a different conversation. When one of the ground rules, I think, is whenever we have whenever we do some discovery, we've got a report that we've observed. These are what we observe. This is what we observe, and what you've told us as a team through the questionnaires or through our observations. So we'll present these issues. We'll give you this feedback as a team. Now, it has to be a clear understanding that nobody sees data that nobody else does. So if there's data to be shared, it's shared between the team leader and the team together. So otherwise, the team will just not trust you.
Thank you. So we have some other questions. Do feel free that you can come off mute. If it ends up being loads of people talking over each other, then I'll stick my facilitator hat on, but we can certainly give it a go. If you do want to come off mute and ask a question, that's fantastic. There's also some that I'll get to in the chat as well. So up to you, self-organize in terms of speaking up and asking questions.
Yeah, Chris.
Thank you, David. You mentioned in one of your slides earlier about coaching teams, but you also mentioned you could be coaching a member or members of that team individually as well. Is there not a danger of conflict of interest in those sort of situations?
Oh, absolutely. So the only way that there are various ways in which you can work, and also ways in which you can't. So if you are coaching the team leader to begin with, and you're extending it out, then it's up to the team leader to, and you would help them to have this discussion with their team about how we extend it to the whole team. Mm-hmm. And usually people are quite accepting of that. However, if you've got individual team members who also need coaching, it's really not appropriate for you to tick off one or two people and do it with them, and not others. So that has to be, I think, a separate arrangement for that person.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm struggling at the moment with the client I'm working with who has basically, I think of this as structural issues. And the problem I'm finding is that we have what is being called a team, which is in effect actually a collection of 2 or 3 sub-teams who each have their own sort of interests and agendas and tasks, but not necessarily all shared with all the others. How do you coach a team like that? What kind of approach can you get, or do you need?
How many people are involved here? How many people are involved here, Chris?
Less than a dozen.
Okay.
Or around about a dozen people.
Okay, so it's still too large to be a real team. So anything over 8, the performance declines quite rapidly. Okay. But nonetheless, we often have to work with so-called teams that are that size. So I think you've got the plus point here that you've got clear delineations in their roles. Mm-hmm. So what we can now talk about is having a team of teams,
right?
And to work with each of them individually as about themselves as a team, and then to bring them together for conversations that say how do they align those 3 teams in what they do. Right,
and differentiate between the different agendas.
Correct. Yeah. So the agenda that you would have for when you bring the 3 of them together will be agenda that's actually relevant to the alignment of the 3, and you'd have a different agenda for each of the meetings you have with them.
That makes sense. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? There are some in the chat that I can read, but I'm just sort of inviting people to step forwards first.
Hello.
Hello.
David, how are you?
All right, good.
It's me, Phil, by the way.
Okay, I can't see you yet, but...
all right. So I may have asked you this question in some other context in the past, but a lot of the challenges that I assume a lot of Agile coaches on this call see is around the design of teams. Yep. So leadership are often, we're often pointed in a direction of a team, which isn't actually a real team. It's not an intact team, and a lot of the criteria which you refer to in the Perel model and the team effectiveness model, they're just not there. What's a strategy for I suppose coaching leadership around the education on what a team actually is and what they have to do in order to create that environment for a team?
Well, I think the starting point, Phil, is that there's this something, come in and turn this lot into a team for me. And the response has to be, no, that's your responsibility. You're the team leader. What I can do is to help you do that in a number of ways. So I can help you think through how you're going to do that. And on certain things, we can come together and have some team coaching around or group coaching, whichever, it doesn't really matter what we call it, but to have some coaching around how they're going to be able to work more effectively together. But if the objective is to turn them into a real team, then it's important to be clear about where they are now and what has to change for them to become a real team. And so it's getting that clarity of what the journey is, but the clarity of where the responsibility is.
David, a follow-up to that question, if I may cut in, sorry, Phil, is when you're talking about the responsibility there, and I'm thinking about a situation where, again, there are, potentially as an Agile coach, looking at a couple of teams, each of which has its own Scrum Master. I'm thinking there's a management person, call it a project manager at the top of that. The teams, say 2 teams of 8, they have within them various, behaviors which probably aren't conducive to good teaming, etc. There's a lot of things that could be fixed in amongst that, or in every direction.
Yeah.
But in terms of responsibilities, now, and I'm thinking of your Nanny McPhee model, to what extent does one go in and start saying, okay, I could see that this person could improve in that respect in order to benefit the team. I could see that the team as a whole could improve in this other respect to benefit the team. To what extent does one get in and start carrying out interventions at a personal or at a team level, or do you coach the scrum masters and or the leader at the top to do that? You know, does it start off with working at the individual levels, and then towards the end you're really stepping away from the individuals and only working at those with the collective responsibility?
There's no single answer to this, as you might expect. But I think the more that the responsibility rests with the team itself, the better. So if people are going to develop, putting that responsibility in helping them to develop each other. So having you know, not just a personal development plan, but a team development plan.
Mm-hmm.
So how does this team as a whole need to develop? And that can include the product owner and the scrum master as part of the development of that development plan. So what actually how do they need to develop as well, in order for this team to perform at the level that it needs to in the future? So you've got a plan that integrates the individual developments with the collective developments, and that way, and then you add to that the responsibility of everybody to support each other's development. You're now into a completely different dynamic than the norm. So the more we try and structure it out, and you're going to develop here and you're going to develop there in isolation, the more difficult it is. If everybody takes collective responsibility for supporting each other in developing those competencies, the better. I mean, let me give you an example from some of the work we've been doing on BOW teams, business evolving as usual teams. So you've usually got business as usual, but now business evolving as usual takes an agile perspective in the sense that everything is changing, nothing's the same. And so how do you actually apply those processes to an individual's development and the collective development? So in the normal appraisal system is somebody sits down with you. So it could be the scrum master, it could be the product owner, and maybe gives you or somebody from HR. It's always a bit complicated, but somebody sits down with you and gives you a performance appraisal. That's all very well, but it's highly judgmental and it's not owned by you. So if you turn it on its head and you say, okay, now you're responsible for your own performance appraisal. So what you're going to do, you're going to go around to all your stakeholders and you're going to ask them what they would like to see you deliver in terms of task and in terms of learning over the next 6 weeks. So now you take that data, and of course you can go then and say, well, how do you think I did against that over the previous 6 weeks? And so you've got this rolling program where your scrum master in particular can be a real coach to you on how on what you've decided you're going to do, you learn, and how you're going to do it. So you've got some real coaching happening now from your scrum master, and from your colleagues as well. But the scrum master is sort of in loco typical a normal leader in this case. The role of the scrum master or team leader is a curator. It's actually holding that process. So if you're constantly going out, getting your own data and managing this, only when somebody is visibly failing do you need to start looking at the typical performance appraisal methods. Right. If you then put all this into a team development plan, so you now see that. How is the team going to be developing and learning over this period? You can also link it with something else, which I think is important, which is the constant experimentation. So experimentation within a typical software writing project, for example, is you're following a route. You've got a structure, and you're doing your sprints to achieve different things. But if you apply this to a normal team, a sales team, or a production team, or whatever, you're now into a different environment. But what you can do is to have a rolling program of experimentation. So you might choose to do a couple of experiments that you think would be helpful, might be related to your learning, might be related to anything, but you agree that the experiments you're going to do. The team as a whole agrees some experiments it's going to do. Now, and what you do on a quarterly basis, you can do a parallel evaluation of where the team is, but also within that is looking at the experiments. So which experiments do we want to drop because they're not working? Which experiments do we want to modify? Which ones do we want to do more of? And see if we can, and so forth. So you build experimentation into the whole system. So it's a very different environment from that which you would normally find in teams, in the standard team within an organization. Does that make sense?
It does, and it reminds me of many of the, I guess, the responsibilities that Scrum Masters and Agile coaches ideally should be delivering, but it's maybe asking a bit too much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That was a long answer.
Yeah, that's good. Brilliant.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Hey, David, I haven't bought your book yet. I have got lots of team coaching books, of course. Does it cover the Peril model and
Absolutely?
things like
Yeah. It brings it all up to date. It was. I mean, there's the combination of 20 years of work in this, and the first edition was 2007. So
yes.
But this one is.
Don't buy that one.
No. Well, historical interest.
I'm a bit busy for that. Thank you.
It's good to be. It's good to know that you're busy.
Yes. Thank you.
Fantastic. So there was one question here while we mentioned the Peril model. In the chat, there was one saying, is it an online team diagnostic system? So I guess you could answer yes or no.
The answer is yes.
No.
Yes and no. So it's one that you can do as an online questionnaire and just survey monkey or whatever you want, or you can sit in the room and do it with them using great flip chart and doing flip charts and post-its. We are in the midst of an app or the design of an app which will make it a lot easier to use and will give a lot more data that you can analyze. So watch that space. Basically, it's due for delivery in October, but we haven't got an agile team working on it, so I can't guarantee it.
It's notoriously difficult to estimate the actual publication date of a book. There's so many things that happen after you've finished it that it's just crazy. Yeah, fantastic. So we've got another question here, which is, it's funny because somebody was asking me this question the other day, and it seems to come up again and again and again. And it'd be fantastic to get your view on it. Or that this one's worded so differently in the chat. It says, how does a company measure or have data to show whether coaching is profitable and whether it actually does increase the performance? So in other words, I've heard this question asked in many different varieties. How do you measure the performance of a coach? How do you measure whether they're effective? All these kind of things. So it's really about measurement. What's your take on that?
It's one of those things. It's almost impossible to answer, not least because the impact of coaching is very often not in the coaching session. It's things that happen later. It's a bit like this whole thing about, do you need to come out of a one-to-one coaching session with a solution to science problems? The answer is no, you don't. In fact, that may be the worst thing to do. If they're advanced in their thinking and they can come to their own conclusions, it's probably a lot healthier. I think it's the same with team coaching as well. we can point to outcomes, but they tend to be much more qualitative so I feel more confident. We have more open meetings. We are more honest towards each other. So these are self-perception or collective perception. But of course, you can go to stakeholders and ask stakeholders what they perceive. So you can get triangulation, which makes it a bit more valid. But if everything is evolving, then it's much more difficult to measure outcomes, because whatever the outcomes are, they're going to be different from the ones that you were predicting when you started.
Yes.
So I think one CEO did put it quite mildly. He said, "I measure the effectiveness of team coaching by the fact that we're still here."
Yeah, it's pretty much the size of it. Yeah. Brilliant, fantastic. So I think that we've actually answered all of the questions in the chat, I think. And just quick skim down once more. Conflict of interest, we did. Oh, there was one here. Is there, I'm going to slightly rephrase it. Is there a difference, I guess, between well, I'll actually read it as it is, and then we can see what happens with it. How to coach a team from an external provider.
So I'm just trying to get my head around that one.
Is there a difference, I guess? Is there any, you know, what's the, if whoever's here asks,
I see.
Yeah, sorry, jump in now.
Yeah.
We work in a company, we have several teams from external providers, from external companies who do this. And we are in a transformation to the, well, way of agility more. And we noticed that these external providers are not really adopting the agile working so easily. They still think of, I am a developer and I don't do test. I'm a tester, I don't do development, and I'm a requirements engineer and I don't do anything, and sort of such things and so on. And we want to have more collaboration between them, more cross-function, that they think of cross-functionality a bit more strongly, and they don't have a waterfall within their sprints because they're just doing Scrum, and for example, and not really being Scrum. And how do I do as an internal coach have an influence, or how can I improve my influence on the external team?
I empathize. This is a really complex one. I'm going to suggest that the answer may not lie in anything that you do. The answer may lie in getting the teams who work with them, who have the greatest stake in them being effective, to actually take responsibility for basically telling them what they need, and building that relationship. And so if you can facilitate a session between one of the internal teams and the external team, to sometimes we call it alignment sessions. It's soft soaping, but that's what it is. And the key to that is that nobody whinges or moans at the other people. Bringing the voice of peers inside the team is likely to be listened to much more than the voice of a manager, a scrum master, a product owner, or a coach. But what's your reaction to that?
Well, okay, that like inviting the external team to work a bit more with an internal team. But my input is that I'm working more exclusively with the external team. I don't have internal teams who can kind of align with them. It's just I want to try to have a stronger influence on the external team. Like, okay, let's have this idea, or how can I help you adopt this idea a bit more strongly? How can we avoid such silos in your heads? And how can I, let's say, how can I better sell the agile idea to these teams? Even when they say okay, we're doing Scrum, we are agile.
Yes, I wonder what proportion of people that say they're doing agile are actually doing agile. That's a great. I've no idea what the answer is, but I suspect it's well, I don't know what the answer is. I can't even guesstimate it. I guess that there is no simple answer to this one. They have to want to listen to you, but drip feed, basically what this is, expectations that you have of them. How are they going to deliver those expectations if they don't, if they retain their current way of working? And even if they say, well, we are doing it, well, say, well, that's but that's not what I need. Let's look at the outcomes. There's a technique we use which is called fault-free conflict analysis. And what we do, we get two groups to keep people together. And you might, if you're representing the internal clients, you might bring some of the internal clients to sit in a room with them. And you start off with some positives. So this is one of the things I really appreciate about working with you, etc. And then you get at the factual. So what actually is happening or not happening in the context of what's being delivered and how it's being delivered. So we're looking at what's missing that needs to be there, or what is there that shouldn't be there. And we look at this from the perspective, so the customer, the internal customer, has a chance to be able to explain what they need and what they're getting. And then we look at it from an emotional point of view. How's the internal customer feeling, and how are you feeling about this? Because it's okay for you to say that you're frustrated by it all, and how are they feeling? And then once everybody's expressed their feelings, and all the way through, you cannot put blame or judgment on anybody else. then you can say to them, okay, so the next stage is, what can we do to support each other, to help each other, or to move, deal with what's not happening, or the problems from the delivery to the customer. It's another tool technique. I don't know if it will work in this circumstance, but it's certainly one that we try in lots of situations.
Well, it sounds a good idea to try. So first, gather the facts, put some, the good things which are working, because actually they are delivering. So there's nothing complain on that, but just we think they can do better. So from the facts, and then go to the emotions, and let our position be explained, like, okay, we would like to do this and this, we expect this and that, and then ask them, or say, okay, what do they expect from us, and see if we can to some conclusion or consent or whatever, an agreement we find. Okay, yeah. That helps. Thanks.
And it's important to get the emotional side out of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that has a big impact.
Otherwise, we don't want to keep a grudge with each other. That's of course clear. Thank you.
Pleasure. Simon, back to you.
Thank you, David. So we've reached the hour. Thank you so much for all of your knowledge and your experience. And thank you everybody who's been asking some fantastic questions and generated these fantastic answers. So if you want more, as Heather explained at the beginning, David is running a fantastic class, fantastic course, which I shall put the URL into the chat. Where you can find out more, and then you'll be able to actually learn and study with David as well, which will be fantastic. I think that's probably it. So thank you. And also, there's one last question. The name of your book, David, just if you could remind people.
It's called Coaching the Work 2. Coaching the Team at Work 2. If the green one comes up, don't buy that one. That's the old one. It's the blue and white cover. Coaching the Team at Work 2.
Brilliant. So thank you so much for your time, and have a fantastic rest of the evening. And that's the same with everybody else as well, whether you're morning, evening, afternoon, middle of the night. Thank you for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next meetup. And I wish you best in your coaching endeavors. So take care. And thanks once again, David. Really appreciate it.
Go safe and well.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.